If you're feeling exhausted and you're struggling to get to the bottom of your never-ending to-do list, chances are you're feeling burned out. If you're bored out of your mind, are counting down the minutes at work, take every chance you get to take a break, and really feel like you're dumbing yourself down at work, chances are you're bored out. And if you struggle to find the meaning behind what you do for work and struggle to find a sense of purpose in your life and feel like when you get up in the morning to go to work just doesn't matter at all, chances are you're experiencing burnout. Hey, I'm Wafa, an ex-investment banker turned career and wellness coach. I'm also a speaker, and on this channel I love talking about everything related to health and wellness, self-care, burnout prevention, and how to transition to fulfilling careers. So last week I filmed a video on the 3 stages of burnout and how to recognize them to be able to better prevent them, whether you're experiencing them or you know someone who's going through them. Pause on this video, watch it first, and then come back here. I'll put the link of that video in the description box or in the info card above. I got a lot of positive feedback on that video, so I felt like filming another video on the difference between bore-out, burnout, and brownout. These terms are thrown away everywhere, and it's hard to know the difference between each of these occupational phenomena, just like the World Health Organization describes it. So in this video, first I'll talk about a bore-out, and you'll see that it's commonly described as a work boredom syndrome. Then I'll talk about a brownout, and you'll understand why it's described as the sort of withdrawal from work syndrome. And finally, I'll talk about something I talked about last week, burnout, and it's commonly known as this work exhaustion syndrome. So bore-out is a form of exhaustion that comes from chronic, continuous boredom at work, and it stems from feeling like you don't have enough on your plate at work, you don't have enough work to do, you don't have enough responsibilities, or the responsibilities that you do have just don't challenge you enough. It's the opposite of burnout, where in burnout you have way too much work on your plate and you just don't even have space left for anything else. I mean, typically this happens to incredibly smart individual or highly educated professionals that just feel like they're wasting their life away at a job where, you know, they're undervaluing their skills, their experience, and everything they have to offer to the table. Obviously, in other scenarios, it just happens because there has been a restructuring of a team, a restructuring of a company, you know, and a rearrangement of the staffing going on that has not been on point yet. And that creates a bit of a shuffle, an inadequate delegation of tasks. So the staffing is messed up, and so people just have less on their plate than they'd want to. We can also see that in certain toxic teams and we see that typically in France, for example, but I'm sure in other countries, where you cannot really get rid of someone and tell them to leave because of their contract, the strong regulations that prevent you from just firing someone on the spot. And so instead of firing someone and having to, you know, talk to HR and create this long process, people tend to isolate certain team members and stop staffing them, or staff them on very, very boring mechanical and menial tasks so that they still have work to do. They're still paid to do something, but it's not interesting. So yeah, that individual just becomes extremely bored, and that affects obviously them on all levels. And you know, the hope of that team is for that employee to just at some point give up and resign on their own, so that the company doesn't have to pay any stipends or any form of salary at the end. People who are bored out really feel exhausted and tired and lethargic. It just gets really hard to get out of bed every morning to go to work, because for what? Nothing exciting is gonna happen. So that individual is just so unexcited about life. And sometimes they are so unexcited that it's hard even to show up at work, if they're showing up at all. And when they're showing up to work, you know, they take every opportunity they can to take cigarette breaks or just coffee breaks, cafeteria breaks. Anyway, cafeteria is their place to be. And they spend as much time possible there to kill time. And when they go back to their desk, they really take their sweet time to do all the tasks they have on hand, to make sure that they're stretched around time, to make sure that they're not paid to do anything, and also that, you know, they're just not as bored. Another thing is that that situation really affects people's self-esteem and sense of self-worth, their self-perception and their self-confidence, because due to the nature of their tasks, people then tend to think, what's the point, you know, of my work? What's the point of me being here anyway? And so with that comes a sense of isolation as well. You know, these people just really feel ashamed about the situation, or they feel angry, or they feel sad. There's just, you know, a whole wave of very uncomfortable emotions that comes with feeling bored out, where you really struggle to be around other people because you may be triggered when people have better responsibilities, or because people get promotions, or, you know, have a better work, a better career and better opportunities. That triggers you, and you start thinking, why do they have, you know, more interesting tasks than I do? And when people ask you, okay, so how is it going with you, with your job? What do you want to say? So that starts becoming uncomfortable very quick. And with all of that uncomfortable process comes something we call numbing, which is a self-defense mechanism that individuals tend to put in place, where they do an activity to forget about the pain of their current situation. Numbing can look like binge watching a lot of shows, or partying nonstop every night, or sleeping in, or having a lot of food cravings and binge eating. Number one, on job descriptions, we typically see what's the role, what does it consist of, and what's required. And then there's usually, you know, a section about the skill set required for such role. And typically, you know, there's a list. Okay, so that person needs to be data-driven and analytic. And I don't want you to believe that you need to have every single skill perfect and narrowed down to be able to apply. Next time you apply for a job description, please challenge yourself and think, it's okay, as long as I have good, strong skills, you know, half of what's listed are like the most important ones, and the rest I can always learn on the go. I can learn on the job, I can learn in the meantime while applying, and before I get the interview, and before I get accepted. You can't be perfect. These job descriptions are just like dating profiles. It's exactly the same as a dating profile. So people, when they're on a dating app, they say, I want, you know, a tall person, and I want them to, you know, be extremely fit, and I want them to have a great job, and I want them to have a pet, and I want them to know different languages and look this and dress like that and have those qualities, yada, 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 you know, and the list goes on. But when it stops you, you don't date because you think, oh my gosh, I'm not eligible to date. You know, nobody's gonna want me. But when you start going out there and you think, wait a minute, I'm a good person. I have this to offer, that's good enough. I can always improve. I'm willing to improve. I'm willing to adapt. I'm willing to make concessions. And I hope that my partner will make concessions and we can grow together. That's the mindset that gets you out there in dating. So is in job hunting. So in your career, get out there, really, you know, be proud of the skills you already have, and have the mindset that you can always grow in the process. That's how you get to challenge yourself and demand more. Okay? That's my number one tip. Number two is to challenge yourself on the job. Once you got that offer and you're on the job, you've settled into the team, you know, the trial period is over, I want you to get outside of your comfort zone regularly and see what's out there. I want you to ask your staffer or the seniors of your team for more projects, for more exposure, for more challenges. I want you also to keep an eye on different side projects that are happening not specifically in your team, but in your company. Maybe in the charity department or in a more creative department with other teams. You know, there's always opportunities to partner to do something more creative with other teams. I have a client who works in banking, and, you know, she has a lot going on your plate, and she's also creating a company on the side. She's a girl boss. But On the side, on top of that, this week when we had a coaching call, she told me, yeah, I have a lot on my plate, Wafa. Let's have a focused session where we could work on productivity and organize my week, because I just said yes to this new project at work that's taking all of my time. And I said, but why did you accept it? And she said, well, I want to gain more exposure because the promotion period is coming up and I want to be top of the line. And that's the mentality. So she knew that to get out there and to have her name really like top of mind for a promotion, she needed to put herself, in situations where she'd gain more visibility. So yes, maybe your team is not staffing you properly at some point. Perhaps you could discuss with other teams to sort of volunteer to participate in other projects. There's always something to gain. Exposure, skills, network. Think about it. Tip number 3, I want you to set your expectations for your career clearly from the get-go. Months ago, I've interviewed a global chief marketing officer, Gretchen, and I'll put the interview right there. She really told me how important it is for her that her juniors, in the team, the team she manages, how it's important every time they join the team, she really sets a time to chat with them and ask them, what are your expectations within this role? What do you expect from me as your manager? How can I help you grow and develop? Where do you see yourself in 1 year and 3 years and 5 years? But how do you want your manager to do that? In the eventuality that they want to do that, how do you want them to do that if you don't know yourself what you want? So it is really your responsibility from the get-go when you join a team to be really clear about what you expect from the team. So state clearly your expectations in terms of career progression and learning curve within your role. And then schedule regular team meetings or one-on-one meetings with your manager to reassess that and how is it evolving within time. Pro tip number 4, life happens, and no matter how much you prepare, at the end of the day, sometimes you can stumble upon teams that are just not ready to give you more responsibility. Certain roles are designed, to have a lot of menial tasks and, unexciting tasks, very mechanical tasks, and they need people to fill those roles. So if this is not for you, here are things you can do. As soon as you acknowledge that you want more and this is way too boring for you, apply somewhere else. You can apply within the company for a more challenging position and the same department or in a different division of the company, or you can apply in a different company, externally, or in a different industry, or even start your own thing. If this is too big of a leap for you at the moment, there's another thing you can do that could help you achieve this on a longer timeline, and that is to develop your skill set frequently. Doing that will really, 1, help you take baby steps towards a future career transition, and number 2, that will help bring more excitement and intellectual challenge into your day-to-day life. That intellectual challenge can take the form of a LinkedIn training, a corporate training paid by your own team or company. It could take the form of you registering for a program online. It could be reading a lot of books. And finally, my last pro tip is honestly have fun in all areas of life. We've talked about people who feel bored out. Of course, it stems from work, but for me, because I have a holistic perspective of career and life, I see that everything is intertwined and connected. So if you're bored at work, chances are you're bored also in your personal life. Or maybe if you're bored in your personal life, perhaps that extends to your work. Everything is connected. So if making changes in your career right now is way too much to ask for you, you just are not there yet, it's okay. Focus on your personal life. And when you do have free time, what can you do to make your day-to-day life less boring? When you get off work, is going to the gym something exciting? Is going to the spa something that's going to excite you? Is cooking something fun? Is hanging out with your family or with your kids something that's going to bring back this sparkle in your eyes? And this option of really focusing on your personal life can also be good for people who just are not ready to take the leap yet and make changes to their career for a multitude of reasons. Maybe they just don't feel like it yet, or they're too scared, or maybe because their job is this sort of golden cage where, it pays really well, they're good at it, it's just that it's boring, and they're not ready and able mentally right now to take any step in changing their career. So right now they're bored and it's annoying, but they can get away with it for a little bit more. And so focusing on the personal life is definitely something that can be powerful and that can have a positive ripple effect on every other area of your life, including your work life. Part 2, burnout. Burnout is a form of work exhaustion that stems from a loss of meaning and perspective from your work. It really stems from this lack of connection to what you're doing every day at work. There's no more meaning. There's no more depth to what you're doing. Essentially, every day you wake up and you're thinking, what's the point of what I'm doing? Why am I doing this? Whose life is this impacting? If I die tomorrow, who's going to remember what I did today at work? These are the type of questions that people who are going through burnout think in their head. And so these professionals really feel this sense of disenchantment or disillusion. And this is a word that I've heard from a few of my clients before, désillusion, and I've felt it too. And you really think, oh, this is what this is about? Like in your head, years ago, you may have fantasized about your line of work, imagined yourself at the office, and you thought, my gosh, I'll be successful when I arrive to that position. And when you're at that position, you're like, this is what this is about? What's the point? It's so empty. It feels empty. It feels like an empty shell. Here's a disclaimer though. It's normal to think these things from time to time. We all think that. And I think it's very healthy because it means that you're ever evolving. Asking ourselves, what's the point of what I'm doing, is extremely healthy because it really shows that you're readjusting and readapting and growing and evolving every day. So in order to readjust, we constantly need to question, what's the point of what we're doing? That's awesome. But burnout is characterized when you think that way for a sustained period of time. And despite keep on asking yourself every single day, what's the point of what I'm doing? What's the point of what I'm doing? For years, no, for days and weeks and months. And no matter how much, challenge you've been picking up at work, efforts, or even maybe promotions or bonuses, whatever, you've tried it all, you still think, what's the point of what I'm doing? That's when you know you're in burnout. So as you understand, it's the biggest cause is our inner soul searching. Such a personal and individual process that cannot be attributed or pinned on any company or any specific industry or line of work. The people who are going through burnout feel extremely tired, exhausted, unexcited, and lethargic. They struggle to wake up to go to work in the morning, and when they do show up at work, they wonder why they're there. They wonder why they should really stay focused on their tasks, so they're often pretty disengaged, unfocused, and they experience a loss in their productivity. They often tend to take a lot of breaks, so cafeteria is their best friend again, just because they think, what's the point? What's the point of me working 12 hours a day or working 2 hours a day? I mean, nobody's dying on the operating table here. That's typically a sentence that we hear from people who are really struggling with the sense of meaning in what they do. People who experience burnout also feel a lot of mood swings, so with intense emotions, it could be sadness, it could be strong anxiety, it could be a sense of depression, sadness, anger, shame, guilt, all those emotions mixed together perhaps. It's very different from one person to another. And that can lead to a sense of isolation where you just don't want to hang out with other people because you feel like everyone around you has found their calling except you. Or, all you think about is, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing in life, I'm lost. And so people around you are just sick and tired of hearing that, so they don't want to hang with you anymore. That lack of fulfillment and loss of purpose can, in certain cases as well, create a sense of depersonalization, where you're completely disengaged with what's going on around you, but also you don't feel like yourself anymore. Perhaps you think, oh my gosh, years ago when I applied for this job, I was full of joy, full of life. I knew what I wanted to do, I wanted to take over the world. I had so many dreams and ambitions, and now I'm just like, what's the point? Who cares? So that's very frustrating, to not recognize yourself. That loss of identity is very hard to go through and handle. And you start feeling like you're a hamster in a wheel, because every day you show up to work, every day that passes by, sunset, sunrise, whatever, and yeah, what's the point? So it's exhausting. That can cause insomnia because there might be a lot of overthinking and anxiety. And finally, I talked about numbing before. This is something that can also happen here for people who experience burnout. They're hungry for meaning in life, but because they haven't found that meaning just yet, at a certain point in time, they start feeding on other things like food, like binge watching, like friends, like relationships, like, you know, and they start obsessing over other things because they're distractions that, you know, stops them from thinking, what am I doing? and about the lack of meaning that they feel in their career. My first tip is acceptance. If you're in this situation, embrace this. It's a sign of healthy spiritual growth to be wondering, what's the point of my life? Why am I here? What's my sense of purpose? As humans, we crave a sense of purpose because life is short and we're all mortals. So no matter what that sense of purpose is to you, it's up to you to find it. And you owe it to yourself to find it. And I believe it's part of it's what makes life fulfilling as a human being, is to find that sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose can change and evolve every year, every month, every decade. It depends on you. It's really up to you. Step number 2, adopt a meaning-centered approach in everything you do in your life. It means that in every single thing you do in your life, especially at work, I want you to wonder, why? You play this game of why. I wonder why. Why am I showing to work this morning? Why am I going to attend this meeting? What did I learn today? Why is that important for me? Why am I having lunch with that person? Why am I networking with that person? Why is it important for me to sleep a certain amount of hours? Your answers only have meaning for you. They only serve you. If you share your answers with someone around you and they say, that doesn't make sense, don't listen to them. You know what makes sense for you. If you can explain, you know, right now, I don't care about my job, but what I care about is to pay my bills, because I have a child to feed, because I have parents to support, because I have myself to support, because I need to support my mental health, and so I'm investing in coaching or in therapy. That's meaningful for you. But be very clear about your value system. For some people, it can be extremely fulfilling, really fulfilling, to work on the trading floor, to work with numbers, to work in fashion and around all that glitz and glam, to work in marketing and just, you know, work really hard to sell products all day and to pitch things. So many brilliant people thrive of that, and perhaps you're one of them who's watching this video. But for some other people, it's hell. It's absolutely meaningless. So it's very important that you figure out what are your core values and to make sure that you live up to them every single day. So every day I invite you to journal and note down your top 3 to 5 values in life. And then rate yourself every single day, every single night, or every single morning, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. How well, you know, how close did I live up to that value? Finally, the last 2 tips I will share in here is, number 1, upskill yourself. So as I shared, you know, this spiritual search of meaning and purpose in life is incredibly normal for all of us individuals. And so it happens to all of us. Next time it happens to you, to prevent feeling completely lost and caught off guard, it's important to upskill and continuously learn new things before you find yourself in that situation, because when that does happen, you can always bounce back and do something else. And finally, last tip, reward yourself. Celebrate your wins. Sometimes life feels empty because we always want more, and more, and more. So it's always, oh my gosh, the hustle. But sometimes, you know, just pressing pause and taking a step back and looking at everything we've achieved and all of our achievements is fulfilling. So get in the habit of celebrating any and every of your wins, little or small. I'm talking, of course, about asking for promotions and new titles at work. I'm talking also about your LinkedIn, upgrading and updating your LinkedIn profile with the new skills that you've learned, your new job, your new missions, you know, the role and the deals and projects you've completed. But I'm also talking about you celebrating with yourself, when you're by yourself, and with your loved ones. Throw parties to celebrate a deal that you've completed at work. Throw parties to celebrate in your client. Indulge into some self-care to celebrate you going through a hard week. These things bring a lot of fulfillment because it's essentially you recognizing your worth and the worth of what you're doing. Sometimes finding a purpose in life doesn't have to be this grandiose and grand thing. It can be very small and as simple as recognizing that you matter, you're worthy, no matter what you do, no matter what line of work you do, just because you're you. It sounds a bit woo-woo, but it's true. Part 3, burnout, the work exhaustion syndrome. So as a reminder, I did film a video about the 3 stages of burnout. Click here to watch it. To sum it up here, workout is the most common form of professional exhaustion. And, it really expresses itself as this multi-level form of exhaustion at an emotional level, a mental level, a physical, and, spiritual level, where we feel completely depleted on all levels. And, that results from this chronic state of stress and overwhelm at work just because the demands were too high. Your to-do list is huge, it's never ending, you're constantly staffed and put on a lot of projects at the same time, and you just have way too much on your plate. That just creates this perpetual state of stress where you're constantly in a state of emergency and you have to execute and produce and react and be present, and you never have this downtime when you can just calm down and focus and relax. That just barely happens, if anything. And that's what really creates this depletion of an individual's resources on a multi-level. There can be a lot of causes to burnout. It could be understaffing of the team, so there's not a lot of people to complete the work, and then all the work and the to-do list then falls on one person, and that person needs to complete the job of many people at the same time. It could be because of micromanagement, so you have a manager who's constantly pressurizing you to do their things their way, and they're never happy with the result, and so that creates this never-ending loop of feedback and then reassessment of the task and then completing the task and reviewing and then redoing it again. It could be also poor management, where the manager just doesn't know how to give, directives to their juniors, and they just sometimes are too vague with their directives and what they're telling their staff or juniors and team members to do, and therefore, the team doesn't really know what they're supposed to do, or when they're given things to do, sometimes they're told to do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, just half of these things were actually relevant for the project on hand. That also can be a cause. It could be also a result of toxic management. So you just have this manager of a boss or this team who just doesn't care about you, doesn't recognize you, doesn't value your presence or your work or your skill, doesn't respect you or doesn't like you. And so they just do anything and everything to make your life impossible at work by either giving you way too much work or just not caring about you or abusing you in any form. And that also can create burnout because you're just working, but there's just no reward, no recognition. You feel unliked, not supported and visible, and that's extremely hard to live. And finally, a common cause of that is the hustle culture. So you get up, it's the end of the day, you've worked really hard, you've done everything you were supposed to do. You get up, you want to go to work, and then you have people coming up to you and saying, "Are you on spring break? Are you on a block leave? What's going on?" And or they mock you, or they just don't say anything, but they just look at each other and you can sense this tension. Or you leave, but everyone else stays, and they stay very long, and then in the morning everyone comes first and they fight to come first, and so you really see that everyone just fights to just show that they're working. Symptoms can look like, exhaustion, lethargy, lack of enthusiasm to go to work, sometimes a strong dread to go to work, fear, anxiety to go back to work, and a loss of enthusiasm and engagement. Like you don't care anymore about what you're doing, you're uninterested, unfulfilled about what you're doing. You just could not care less about what you have to do. You almost loathe what you're working on right now. Other types of symptoms can be, physical, where you have headaches and migraines, and, you feel dizzy, you have back pains and bloating, and sometimes eye problems, or nervous contraction of your body, canker sores and fever. Sometimes it's a loss of appetite, sometimes it's binge eating. And your mood as well is very low. You feel depressed, you feel sad, you feel guilty for not liking your job anymore and feeling too stressed out, and you feel weak, and you really start beating yourself up for not being up for the challenge and not being as strong and resilient as, quote unquote, as the other people around you. You start feeling also like, you are not worthy anymore. Your self-esteem can start to tank as well, your self-confidence, you start doubting yourself. And so, yeah, you become really cynical and distance yourself from your current role. I did film a video on how to recover symptoms of burnout. You can watch this video here. Other tips that I would share here are, first is to set boundaries. Set boundaries with your team as soon as you get into the team and really tell them, hey, I don't think it's relevant for the team and for our timeline to staff me on this specific project. I already have a lot on my plate, and for me to deliver properly and to be at my best, I don't think staffing me on this new opportunity is the right call. This is a way that you can elegantly and politely, set a boundary. Another tip is delegating. If this is something that can happen in your team, you can delegate. You can either outsource certain tasks to third parties, or you can delegate to members of your team that are at a more junior level. It could be interns, it could be analysts. It's all about and how you say it to them. So it's all about really inquiring about what they're working on and then really showing them what's in it for them when you do delegate some tasks to them. What's in it for them is really learning, the learning curve. Think about their learning curve and what do they have to get out of it. At the end of the day, they're just like you. So think about what you wanted when you were at their world. Another huge tip, obviously, self-care. This is something that I get in depth in the video that I've shared with you seconds ago. Making sure that you take time for yourself to press pause and, care for yourself. Sleep and hydrate and eat healthy and work out a little bit, even though you don't have to go to the gym to do that. Soak some sun in. Even though it's winter, you can still soak in some light in. It's so important, for you, for your mental health and emotional health. Surround yourself with positive and supportive people. All the naysayers, all the haters, all the people who doubt you and judge you, even though they could be parents sometimes, it's not the best time to hang around them because you want to protect yourself. You already feel a bit vulnerable right now, so now is the time to really cocoon yourself as much as you can. So even if the symptoms between all those 3 forms of professional exhaustions are very similar, they're all triggered by different factors. So it's really important to understand where your symptom or your loved one's symptoms are coming from to be able to acknowledge what's going on and then take appropriate action to do what's best for you and your career. I really hope these tips were helpful. Thank you for watching this video, and if you want to watch more content on burnout prevention, career fulfillment, or self-care and health at work, please click on the screen to watch my other videos and playlists. If you've enjoyed this video, like it, subscribe, and see you next week for more. Bye!